Welcome to Spiritual Insurgency. I'm Jason Lupo, sitting here with my co-host Aaron Lujan.
What's up, guys?
And today we're talking about the Colorado Springs ICE raid.
Ice,
And with
baby.
that,
Ice.
all sorts of other dynamics of this raid. I think that there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to talk about from a community perspective. There's a lot to talk about from an immigration perspective.
Civil libertarian perspective.
There's also the civil libertarian perspective, due process. All of that is a very interesting conversation to have. And I think that we need to have it from the lens of a biblical worldview, but also from the lens of stepping back and looking at it not just dedicated to a party line.
No, I agree. And can I break down the nuts and bolts real quick for our listeners?
Please do.
So on Sunday, April 27th, 2025, a underground nightclub, as they're calling it, in Colorado Springs, operating under the name Warwick or Warwicky Events, was raided early in the morning, led by the Drug Enforcement Agency, known as the DEA, in a multi-law enforcement agency coordinated effort. FBI, ICE, ATF, the DHS, and 40 Colorado Springs Police Department officers. The reason for the raid is that there was a long-term surveillance operation for drug trafficking, prostitution, violent crimes, and gang activity. It was suspected that the famous Venezuelan gang, now an international terrorist organization, Tren de Agua, MS-13, and Hell's Angels were suspected to be at this club. They came in, they raided it. Hopefully we'll be able to roll the video throughout this broadcast. 114 plus migrants were detained for being in the U.S. illegally, so they're now under ICE custody. Interestingly, active duty military members from Fort Carson were working as security and also identified as patrons and were handed over to the Army CID. Is CID their court thing? What does that stand for? Do you know?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay. And then 2 arrests on unrelated warrants, failure to appear. Weapons and drugs were seized. They keep talking about some pink cocaine called Tusi. When I first read it, I read Tulsi, like Tulsi Gabbard's now a flavor of cocaine, like she's got her own cocaine out. That was kind of interesting. But no, Tulsi's not marketing cocaine. There's a pink cocaine. There's a pink cocaine called Tusi. Guns, ammunition were found. Jason, thoughts?
Well, pink cocaine, for those of you that are listening, is a combination of multiple drugs. Could be any number of them. There's actually like 4 or 5 different combinations that the cartels are dyeing pink and distributing. So it's not necessarily the same across the board. It becomes really dangerous. A lot of it's mixed with fentanyl. Pink cocaine is nothing to be screwing around. And it's definitely not your typical cocaine that I mean, I never did cocaine, but I guess the cocaine from back in the day. Like, that's not what we're talking about.
We're not talking about that pure Miami early 80s cocaine when America was just a lot better.
You had this twinkle in your eye, Aaron. It just makes me question what might have happened in earlier life, Aaron.
I want to go on record and say I've never once used cocaine, and that is the honest truth. I have done beer. I've done the beer before.
The beer.
The beer. I've done the
beer.
The beer.
Well, interesting. The whole thing is interesting. I think that the response from Colorado Springs governments is very interesting. If we break this down and look, I want to talk about this for a second, and we're gonna roll a clip on Mayor Yemi Mobilade in a second. But Mayor Yemi posted on Facebook on April 27th. The Colorado Springs Police Department participated in a multi-agency operation at an underground nightclub on South Academy Boulevard. I was briefed ahead of today's coordinated operation, and I want to thank the DEA's Rocky Mountain Field Division, the Colorado Springs Police Department, and all of our local, state, and federal partners for their work to enforce the rule of law. Let me be clear, criminal activity of any kind from anyone will not be tolerated in Colorado Springs. The investigation and the execution of these warrants are the results of clear evidence of serious criminal conduct. Our residents deserve to live in a city where the rule of law is upheld and where illegal behavior is met with firm and decisive action. We will continue to working together to ensure the safety and well-being of our entire community. El Paso County Sheriff's Office. This one is a very interesting response. Sheriff Joseph Roybal condemns false narratives surrounding DEA bust at illegal nightclub. El Paso County Sheriff Joseph Roybal issued the following statement following a series of stories coming from local and national media regarding joint law enforcement activity over the weekend in the Pikes Peak region. He says, and I quote, "I refuse to sit back and allow people to make law enforcement the villains. These same people want the community to believe those individuals in illegal activity are victims. The operation designed to stop criminal activity early on Sunday morning did not take place in a church, school, grocery store, library, or any other location where law-abiding citizens carry on with their lives. It took place in an establishment created and known for the open use of and sale of illicit drugs, gang activity, violence, and the sale of women, human trafficking for sex. We must question and ask why people frequent such an establishment. Those present at the illegal nightclub contributed to, participated in, or at the very least, were aware of the activities within the establishment.
Fair enough.
Criminals must not be allowed to hide behind the cloak of their immigration status as a shield from prosecution and accountability. As sheriff, I am wholly committed to keeping my citizens and deputies who live and work in my community safe. To do so, we will continue to arrest and charge criminals regardless of their country of origin. I will not allow media and those who are not public safety experts to continue pushing a false narrative and defame the hard work of my deputies and law enforcement in the Pikes Peak region." And finally, the county commissioners, and it appears like I did not pull that up, so we are going to end there, but I will pull that up in a sec. But
Sure.
the Gazette did report that just in, Colorado Springs mayor expects more raids, arrests after nightclub bust.
Well, joining us now, Colorado Springs Mayor Yemi Mobilati. Mayor, great to have you. Thank you so much for taking the time. All of this taking place in your community, the story Jorge just highlighted, what was your reaction to this development and to these arrests?
Kelly, first of all, thank you for having me on your show. My reaction was just full of pride to the Colorado Springs Police Department, the DEA of the Rocky Mountain Field Division, and so many of our local and federal law enforcement partners in this coordinated efforts, working well together for what I believe is a successful operations to take down the criminal activity that's happening here in my city. It moves us one step to becoming a safer community.
Yeah, and so many would agree. How would you describe crime in Colorado Springs? Are there specific trends you've been witnessing?
Yeah, the good news is crime as a whole in Colorado Springs is trending in the right direction, downward. But there are a couple of areas that we're paying attention to, including violent crime as well. But one of the things that my police department has been taking an active of leadership is how we bring down the drug and criminal activity around illegal drug use in Colorado Springs. Like many communities in across the U.S., especially when you're along the I-25 interstate corridor, it's a hub for crime to move through that interstate corridor. But we are making sure that we are staying ahead of it, and we're cracking down on that type of criminal activity in Colorado Springs as well.
Yeah, and these numbers absolutely stunning. What are the next steps in this case? Do you think we could see even more arrests as this investigation continues as a result?
I anticipate that there will be more arrests. I hope to see more raids happen in my city. This is not the first one. These operations often take months to get to a point where we can actually go in, and it takes a lot of coordination between so many different partners. 40 of my police officers were involved in this underground raid, working with many of our federal partners. So this is for us. This is an everyday posture and everyday work that we do to ensure the safety of our community.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about that partnership. You know, this comes as a similar story emerges from Florida, where ICE arrested nearly 800 migrants in a first of its kind operation. Many there saying partnership between state and local officials was highly successful, helped drive those results. How critical is it that these departments are on the same page? Do you feel like the Trump administration is playing a role in that coordination?
Absolutely. And we've always been proud of the partnership we've had with the feds. We're actively working. Many of my team members are actually working closely in the task force or the DEA task force, and so we have partnership across all federal levels. And so it takes a village. It takes a village to make a community safe.
Aaron, what's your first take on these?
I think you can have too much of a good thing. So I love this idea that we're taking a hard-handed approach on crime, because I think every sane person is going to agree that they don't want human trafficking, drug trafficking, gang violence in their backyard. And this happened in our backyard. Jason and I are coming from Colorado Springs right now. And what's up with all these Colorado national news stories all of a sudden? Like, all eyes on Colorado the minute we start Spiritual Insurgency. Did we bring the storm, or did God position us to be in the storm? What's going on?
No, Colorado, because all the eyes were in California, Colorado became the liberal state to follow.
So we're the new California?
And we are setting the standard for all the other liberal states in the country.
Okay. Well, going back to this raid, so yeah, all these things are bad. And if you're at a nightclub in the middle of the night, and I looked on the Facebook page of this nightclub, and I'm familiar with this genre of nightlife activity. I actually had a friend in college who owned a series of nightclubs that service predominantly Mexican and Central American nationals. This looks like one of those places. Now, that doesn't mean that if it's a Latino club that they're all centers for drug trafficking and human trafficking. There's a certain vibe of them, just like there's English-speaking ones. So all this to say that anybody who was there knew that they were at the wrong place at the wrong time. To quote my grandmother, nothing good happens after 9 o'clock. So if you're there and you get rounded up, I don't have a lot of sympathy for you, because you're at the wrong place at the wrong time. You hang out with gang members, you hang out with drug traffickers. Don't be surprised that you might get caught up in a raid with ICE and DHS. However, what I think the part that's being missed by Trump's base and by MAGA and by law and order conservatives is the civil libertarian argument. So you had the DEA, the FBI, ICE, ATF, the DHS, and 40 CSPD officers all coordinating for this event. Many are arguing, and it's a very reasonable argument in my opinion, that this could have been done with a lot less heavy-handedness. I think this is a spectacle. I think it could be political theater. I think that the church should be suspicious in feeding into the hand of this show of strength for law enforcement, because I think within it lies a potential Trojan horse. And that Trojan horse that I'm speaking of is the loss of civil liberties. Because what we're doing is, I think these types of raids condition the general public that we can take a group of U.S. citizens in the United States, and through the show of hard-handed law enforcement, go in with guns pointed, smashing windows, ordering people into the ground because there was suspicion of something happening. I think that this could potentially set us up for a dystopian future where we have a police state. The police state has been encroaching on civil liberties for decades now, and maybe, just maybe, we're seeing the rise of it. Do you think that that's a valid argument?
I think this is interesting because I understand where people are coming from. And we look at stories like, who is that absurd basketball player that got arrested in Russia?
Dennis Rodman? Oh, no, the dude that was pretending she was a chick?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, she gets arrested in Russia for bringing marijuana. I think that it's not confirmed.
They them was smoking the marijuanas.
I don't think that the they them part is confirmed.
No, that's a conspiracy theory.
Okay, so aside from the conspiracy theory, brings marijuana into Russia, gets arrested, thrown in jail for a very long time, much longer than now you don't even get thrown in jail in this country for marijuana. But beside the point. And everybody cries foul and says due process, due process, due process. Well, she actually got her due process. I mean, they have a court system. We might not agree with their due process, but they still have a due process. And so when we look at immigrants in this country and we go, they need due process, I think it's really important to note that if we're just throwing them on a plane and sending them back to their country, no due process is required. No due process is required if we're going to load them up on a plane and deport them to their own country. That's not a thing. Now, if we're going to throw them into a United States jail, due process should be required. And I agree with that. If we're going to deport them to a jail that we have rented or leased foreign, like in El Salvador, and we're going to keep them there, they should have a trial. Now, whether or not we hold them in the U.S. before their trial or El Salvador before their trial does not matter. I don't think that matters at all. Now, if we're going to hold any of these individuals, they should have a court trial. I do agree. I do agree that if we're going to throw them in jail for a very long time, due process is still required. Just like we would expect due process in any country that we went to if we were to break a law.
But if these are criminal illegal aliens, which is the focus of the story, they're saying 100 illegal migrants were arrested and referred to ICE. I mean, there is no due process if you're in this country illegally. You broke the law, whether you broke it in the U.S. or you broke it in your home country. Doesn't your butt get sent back to the country you came from immediately?
There is due process if we decide to incarcerate them in the United States.
Okay, under what circumstances would it be wise for the United States to incarcerate an illegal alien?
In the case that they continue to reappear in the United States.
Got it. So if there's a recidivism...
That's my personal opinion. So essentially, if you come here illegally, you break the law, we deport you back to your country, then you come back and you break another law, that there's deportation, I do not believe is an option any longer. We need to incarcerate them and have them pay for the crimes that they committed in this country, or in El Salvador, or wherever we lease prison space. I don't care.
Which is why we love our international partners like Bukele in El Salvador, who's saying, actually, if you guys send our citizens and deport them back here to El Salvador, we're going to make sure they never get out. We're going to basically lock it and throw away the key, right? Have you seen those facilities, brother? Like those Walmart facilities?
Oh yeah, and I used to there was that prison show where the guy gets locked up for like a week in all these different countries, world's worst prisons, whatever.
Locked up abroad?
Yeah, something like that.
Nat Geo, bro. You guys got to see it.
Totally
Fire, bro.
They
It's
did
fire.
that show for a while.
Fire, bro.
To see how different countries treat and incarcerate their prisoners and how they treat them is very interesting.
We have a lot to learn.
Especially when you look at some of the European countries. It looks like just a nice little retreat in a hotel.
Yeah, it's like a 3-star hotel in Albuquerque over in Ukraine.
There's sometimes it's like, you know what, might as well go to that country and break a law.
Right.
Cheaper to live.
It might be cheaper to just, like steal some gum for the night, because then your accommodations will be a little bit better than what you could have afforded in Bucharest.
Well, news coming out today, or actually last night, U.S. and Uzbekistan forged strong security partnership with historic deportation operation. Today, the Department of Homeland Security, under Secretary Noam's leadership, partnered with the government of Uzbekistan to successfully deport over 100 illegal aliens from Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan. This operation, in which Uzbekistan fully funded the deportation of their own nationals, underscores the deep security cooperation between our nations and sets a standard for U.S. alliances. The fact that Trump is getting other countries to pay for the deportation of their citizens is absolutely awesome.
It's unbelievable. You look at the numbers.
And they're going to pay for the wall.
They're going to pay for the wall. Unbelievable. No,
international cooperation the way it's supposed to be, right? Because now what you do is you have two nation states that are saying we're going to cooperate and we're going to work together in keeping our countries safe and secure and enforcing our borders. And that's why I love Bukele in El Salvador, because he is telling the United States, we're going to cooperate in your best interest. So in other words, if you guys deport one of our citizens, we're not going to let them go back and use your resources and threaten your country anymore. So yeah, go Trump. I think it's all good in the hood.
So FloridaPolitics.com releasing an article, questions about due process. Ashley Moody highlights expedited removal process for certain illegal aliens. Senator Ashley Moody is defending the process and the strategy of limiting due process in these cases. There are exceptions in terms of who is eligible for expedited removal, especially when they came in and started designating some of these cartel members and cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, said Florida's junior senator on Fox and Friends First. Moody was responding to a Trump interview on ABC News about due process for the class of suspects, in which the president said his administration does not follow the legal process, but can, quote, can't have a trial, a major trial for every person that came in illegally. They get a process where we have to get them out, Trump clarified. The president stood firm behind this position. I hope we get cooperation from the courts because we have thousands of people that are ready to go out, and you can't have a trial for all of these people, Trump said earlier this month via the New York Times. We don't think there's anything that says that. We're getting them out, and a judge can't say, no, you have to have a trial, Trump added. The trial is going to take 2 years. We're going to have a very dangerous country if we're not allowed to do what we're entitled to do. I stand by my former statement that if we're planning on incarcerating them, they should have a trial. But if we're just going to deport them back to their own country, they don't need a trial. They don't have due process.
And it's important. We're on Spiritual Insurgency. Jason and I are believers. We're analyzing the current news trends and cycles through a biblical worldview. It's important, I think, to just take a moment to remind the church that the church must be solidly on the side of immigration enforcement and protecting borders and having strong nations. I debated this recently. I'm not going to go into a diatribe. Just really quickly, bear with me here. In 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 13 to 14, submit yourselves for the Lord's sake to every human institution, whether to a king as the one in authority or governors as sent him by the punishment of evildoers and the praise of those who do right. Right now we have biblical government because our government is currently enforcing our borders. They're penalizing criminals. They're de-incentivizing crime. If you come to this country and intend to hurt our citizens and break the law, you will be punished, which is a departure from the past. So I think this is something that the church needs to be applauding. That's all I wanted to say, Jason.
Yeah, and I think that if you are a Christian that's out there and looking at it and going like, grace, grace, grace. God gives us grace, but ultimately at the end of the day, what you do here on this earth still has punishment here. And so regardless of whether or not you receive redemption and eternal life and you are redeemed by the blood of Jesus Christ, it does not change the fact that here on earth there is punishment for the actions that you have. And it doesn't say anywhere that you are exempt from facing the consequences of your choices on earth.
Yeah, we don't live in a John Lennon world where there's no borders, there's no religion. No, there are very
strawberry fields forever.
And Jason, that's a great voice. Jason, you need to go on American Idol.
I think so.
Acts 17 verse 26 says, from one man he made all the nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. I would argue that Acts chapter 17 is proof that God is into borders and boundaries and lands. In Deuteronomy 32:8, when the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, when he divided all mankind, he set up boundaries, I hope that's not annoying, for the peoples according to the number of the sons of Israel. And in Exodus 22, without penalty, evil continues. Penalties for law breaking is throughout the book of Exodus. Bottom line, ladies and gentlemen, strong borders, distinct nation states are of God, and we need to stand by our government when they do it. However, we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater, and so I would definitely want to have a civil liberty conversation about the raids, but I think,
Yeah, and I gave an example earlier. It was totally a bad example, but getting kicked out of a bar is a better example, right? Like, you get tossed out of the bar.
happens all the time to Jason.
Not to me. I don't typically drink,
He
but
doesn't go to bars.
you get tossed out of the bar. There's no due process. You don't. They don't put you in front of the entire bar and go like, we need a jury trial to figure out if we should kick this person out of the bar. No, you get kicked out of the bar, and if you refuse to leave, you get thrown out of the bar. And if you still refuse to leave, then you might have due process because you're probably going to be removed by officers.
Some dude named Marcus is gonna make you fly.
Yeah.
Look at me, Mom, no hands.
But so yeah, I think that I do understand where you're at when it comes to just rounding up people. I don't think that's the situation that we are looking at the present moment. It does not appear like any American citizens will be charged. There was one article that said that perhaps the only American citizens that will face consequences are those in the United States military.
But we would be remiss if we didn't bring up the fact that there were U.S. Army Fort Carson soldiers that were detained and have been handed over to the Judicial Criminal Division of the military base. And it reminds me of an article that I came across back years ago in San Diego. Marine base Camp Pendleton had active duty Marine Corps soldiers funneling weapons from their cache to active gang members on the streets of San Diego County. So essentially what that report unveiled was corruption within the military, that there were men in the ranks that were actually active duty gang members. And so the question becomes in this particular raid situation, because for those that aren't familiar with Colorado Springs, we are a military town. We're surrounded by so many facilities, Fort Carson being one of the biggest. We do community with these people every day. So this idea that we had Fort Carson soldiers at this nightclub providing, in the CNN article, security for the event and potential patrons, it raises the question, is there cooperation, is there association between known gang members, illegal aliens, and active duty military personnel? Are we potentially sitting on a potential huge story that could get uncovered?
Yeah, definitely. I know that seems like kind of a stretch, but I don't think that we're stretching too far there. I do think that when you decide to perform a security task and you decide to bring loaded weapons in to defend some sort of place or some sort of activity, it is on you to determine whether or not what you are defending or what you are providing security for is ethical. And if there's not law-abiding citizens in that particular place and everything is not to the standard of what is acceptable in this country, then you will be held accountable. I think that is made very clear. Guns and drugs in this state and in any state do not mix. They just don't. I mean, and not from like a safety concern, but the fact that like when you have drugs and guns at the same place, it typically doesn't scream law-abiding citizen.
Yeah, I don't think we found Mr. Rogers at the nightclub there that night. He was not doing a nursery school Sunday.
It's because Mr. Rogers has died.
Rest in peace, Mr. Rogers. No, guns and drugs don't mix. I think this story is going to continue to evolve. I think that there's going to be a civil libertarian argument, this notion that there could potentially be a Trojan horse within these types of raids, where we're potentially going to start dividing communities. We're going to start infringing on the rights, the civil liberties of American citizens. But then there's also this red meat MAGA element to it, where there's a round of applause. There's a standing ovation that Trump is good on his word, and we got ICE rounding up hundreds of illegals at once, and we're killing multiple birds with one stone. Because not only are we rounding up the migrants, we're rounding up the drugs, the guns, the Tulsi, the Tusi, the pink cocaines, all of it, all at once. And so it's a movie, guys, and stay tuned.
This idea that somehow we can fix this issue and fix the mass immigration, illegal immigration that was allowed by the Biden administration, and do so with due process before we remove each and every one of these individuals from this country. Trump is not wrong. I mean, our justice system and what goes on and the amount of public defenders that we have, we cannot move 1 million immigrants a year out of this country like they came into this country. And so if we're going to do what Trump was voted in to do, which is to solve this illegal immigration crisis, which is causing the cost of living to skyrocket and the cost of healthcare to skyrocket and the cost of all of these goods and services to skyrocket in this country because of illegal immigration. Meanwhile, the taxes on American citizens continue to go up because those that aren't here legally are not paying taxes. So it puts the burden on the rest of Americans. I mean, all of this is something that we voted Trump in office to solve, to make a positive impact on. And here we have him making a positive impact on it. And squeaky wheel gets the grease. And those that voted for cocking, that doesn't even sound like a good word, but Kamala Harris, cackling Kamala Harris.
Cockling.
I don't even.
What is she doing over there?
It beats me. She wants to run again.
You just fell out of a coconut tree.
Everybody loves this yellow school bus.
Yeah.
We've gotten far too removed from this conversation at this point, so we're going to call it a day, but join us tomorrow at 3 p.m. This is Spiritual Insurgency. Have a blessed day.
Hang loose.